Ancient civilizations mastered technologies that would not be seen again for over 1,000 years. We are about to explore 30 ancient inventions that were centuries ahead of their time, discoveries that will fundamentally change how you view human history. By the end, you will understand that our ancestors possessed a scientific and engineering genius rivaling our own. How did a 2,000-year-old device accurately predict cosmic events? Why does a Roman cup change color with a trick of the light? What do you believe is the most impressive feat of ancient engineering? The answer to that last question might just lie at the bottom of the sea. In the year 1900, sponge divers off the coast of a small Greek island named Antikythera stumbled upon a shipwreck from the 1st century before the Common Era. Among the shattered statues and ancient artifacts, they recovered a corroded lump of bronze and wood that seemed entirely unremarkable. It was only years later, when an archaeologist noticed a carefully inscribed gear wheel peeking through the calcified crust, that the world realized this lump was one of the most significant scientific finds in history. This was the Antikythera Mechanism, a device so complex it has been called the world's first analog computer. For decades, scientists painstakingly cleaned and studied the fragments, using advanced X-ray and imaging technology to peer inside without destroying it. What they revealed was breathtaking. The mechanism was an intricate clockwork of at least 30 interlocking bronze gears, housed in a wooden case no larger than a shoebox. On the front was a large circular dial, and on the back 2 spiral dials, all with pointers that moved like the hands of a clock. But this was no timepiece. By turning a hand crank on the side, the entire system would whir to life, calculating the movements of the cosmos. It could show the positions of the sun and the moon against the backdrop of the zodiac, predict lunar and solar eclipses years in advance, and even track the 4-year cycle of the Olympic Games. The precision of its gearing was extraordinary. One specific gear with 223 teeth perfectly modeled the lunar month, accounting for the subtle wobble in the moon's orbit, a phenomenon known today as lunar anomaly. This was not a simple teaching model. It was a precise, predictive astronomical calculator. The technological leap this represents is almost incomprehensible. Nothing of comparable mechanical sophistication would appear again until the astronomical clocks of medieval Europe, more than 1,300 years later. The Antikythera Mechanism stands as a solitary, brilliant beacon, a testament to a level of Greek scientific and engineering genius that was then utterly lost to the world for centuries. It forces us to ask what other marvels of ancient technology still lie hidden, waiting to be pulled from the depths of time. While the Greeks were mapping the heavens, another ancient power perfected a weapon that seemed to control the very element of fire itself. For the Byzantine Empire, survival often depended on its navy, and its most terrifying naval weapon was a liquid flame known simply as Greek fire. This was not ordinary fire. When unleashed upon the sea, it did not sizzle and die. Instead, it clung to the water's surface, creating a raging, unstoppable inferno that would chase enemy ships and their terrified crews. Imagine the horror of watching fire, which should be quenched by water, instead flowing over the waves like a predatory beast. This terrifying substance gave the Byzantine fleet an almost mythical advantage for centuries. The secret of Greek fire was its deployment. It was not merely thrown in pots, it was projected. Byzantine warships were outfitted with bronze siphons mounted on their prows that could spew this fiery liquid in a continuous stream over a surprising distance. In the heat of a naval battle, these devices would have functioned much like modern flamethrowers, cutting through the chaos with a focused jet of destruction. The psychological impact alone was devastating. An enemy fleet, confident in its numerical superiority, would see a single, smaller Byzantine dromon turn, its strange nozzle emitting a hiss, and then a torrent of fire would arc across the water, igniting everything it touched. Wood, sails, and men would be consumed by a blaze that water could not put out. Sand, vinegar, and even urine were tried by panicked sailors, but often to no avail. The fire was said to burn even more fiercely when one attempted to douse it. This technological monopoly secured the walls of Constantinople for nearly 500 years. It was the empire's ultimate trump card, repeatedly saving its capital from sieges, most famously against the Arabs in the 7th and 8th centuries. The secret of its manufacture was considered a matter of national security, so closely guarded that it was known only to a select few, perhaps even only to the reigning emperor and one family of chemists. The formula died with them. To this day, we can only theorize about its precise ingredients. Most experts believe it was a volatile combination of crude petroleum or naphtha, mixed with resins and perhaps quicklime, which would generate heat upon contact with water, helping to reignite the floating fuel. Some speculate pine resin or saltpeter was added to create the adhesive, sticky quality and the intense, persistent burn. The true legacy of Greek fire is not just in the battles it won, but in the shadow it casts on history. It stands as a permanent question mark, a stark reminder of advanced knowledge that was so utterly lost. What other formulas, what other applications of chemistry and engineering vanished because their secrets were held too close? From the terrifying spectacle of liquid fire, we travel to a quieter, more puzzling discovery. In the archives of the National Museum of Iraq sits a small, unassuming clay jar. It is not much to look at, just over a dozen centimeters tall, sealed with an asphalt stopper. But inside this jar lies a mystery that has divided archaeologists for decades. Through the asphalt plug runs an iron rod surrounded by a copper cylinder. When it was unearthed from a Parthian or Sasanian site near Baghdad, dating from 250 years before the Common Era to 250 years after, its purpose was a complete enigma. Then, in the 1930s, a German archaeologist named Wilhelm Koenig proposed a startling theory. This object, he suggested, was not a storage jar for scrolls or spices. It was an ancient electric battery. If he was correct, this simple clay pot predates the official invention of the electrochemical cell by Alessandro Volta in the year 1800 by nearly 2,000 years. The principle is simple yet brilliant. If the jar was filled with an acidic liquid like vinegar or grape juice, the electrolyte would react with the two different metals. The iron rod would corrode, releasing electrons, and a voltage would appear between the copper cylinder and the iron. It is a basic galvanic cell, capable of producing a little over 1 volt of electricity. To test the theory, replicas have been built and they do, in fact, work. They generate a small but consistent electrical current. This single fact ignites the central controversy. Was it truly a battery, or was it something more mundane, like a sacred storage vessel for important scrolls? The debate has raged ever since. If it was a battery, what on earth did the ancients use it for? One compelling idea is electroplating. The Parthians and Sasanians were master metalworkers, known for gilding silver and applying thin layers of gold onto other metals. The standard explanation involves mercury and heat, but could a bank of these batteries connected together have provided a gentle electrical current for electroplating, depositing a layer of gold onto a silver statue? Another theory points to the medical texts of the ancient world, which describe using the shock from electric fish to numb pain. Could a small, controllable electrical current from a jar have been used for a similar therapeutic purpose, a tingling sensation to soothe aching muscles? Skeptics argue there is no conclusive proof, no wires have ever been found, and no ancient texts describe such a device. Yet the existence of the Baghdad battery, even as a possibility, forces a profound question. How many other simple, brilliant ideas were discovered, used, and then forgotten, leaving behind only a cryptic artifact for us to puzzle over? It challenges the very linear timeline of human progress. suggesting that the spark of discovery can flash into existence only to be swallowed by the darkness for centuries. The quiet mystery of the Baghdad Battery gives way to a technology of staggering, visible permanence. Walk through Rome today, and you stand in the shadow of 2,000-year-old monuments that have withstood earthquakes, invasions, and the slow decay of the centuries. The Pantheon's majestic dome, still the world's largest unreinforced concrete dome, has a secret locked in its very fabric. Modern concrete, the material that builds our cities, often begins to degrade within decades, cracking and spalling under the assault of the elements. Yet Roman concrete, especially the kind used in their maritime structures, performs a miracle. It actually grows stronger when bathed in seawater. For years, the full recipe was a lost art, a technological triumph hidden in plain sight. Roman engineers did not use our simple Portland cement. Their concrete was a sophisticated geopolymer, a mix of lime and volcanic ash, specifically a type of ash from the town of Pozzuoli. They would combine this ash with lime and chunks of rock, then pack it into wooden molds to be submerged in the sea. The magic happened in the water. A complex chemical reaction began, a process modern scientists have only recently decoded. Seawater would seep into the concrete, reacting with the lime and the volcanic ash to form a rare, plate-like mineral called aluminous tobermorite. These interlocking crystalline plates act as a reinforcing fiber within the matrix of the concrete, blocking the propagation of microcracks and actually strengthening the structure from within over time. It is a self-healing material. If a crack does form, seawater seeps in and the chemical process starts again, filling the gap with new, durable crystals. This is the complete opposite of modern concrete, where water penetration usually spells the beginning of the end. The implications are enormous. Today, our coastal cities spend billions to repair crumbling seawalls, piers, and breakwaters. The Romans built harbors that are not only still standing, but are genuinely more robust now than when they were first poured. Scientists are now racing to reverse engineer this ancient alchemy, hoping to create a new generation of durable, environmentally friendly concrete that could reduce the massive carbon footprint of modern cement production. To look at a Roman aqueduct marching across the countryside or to stand beneath the vast, silent dome of the Pantheon is to witness an engineering philosophy we are only just relearning. They built not for a generation but for the ages, and their silent stone holds a lesson we are desperately trying to hear again. The silent endurance of Roman concrete gives way to a more delicate artifact, one that holds a secret visible only in a shifting play of light. In the British Museum rests a small, ornate drinking vessel from the 4th century, known as the Lycurgus Cup. At first glance, it seems a solid, opaque green, the color of jade. But hold it up to a light source and a miracle occurs. The green vanishes, replaced by a glowing, translucent ruby red, as if the cup itself is filled with wine. This is not a trick of stained glass. It is a feat of nanotechnology achieved 1,600 years ago. The Romans who crafted this cup had, by accident or by astonishing design, discovered how to manipulate matter at a scale invisible to the human eye. They infused the glass with a precise colloidal suspension of gold and silver particles. These were not mere specks of dust, they were nanoparticles, each 1,000th of times smaller than a grain of sand. The manufacturing process was a high-wire act of chemistry and heat. Artisans would have had to mix molten glass with finely ground gold and silver dust, then carefully control the cooling process. If the temperature was even slightly wrong, the metals would have clumped together, creating a dull, muddy color instead of the magical dichroic effect. The result was a suspension of particles so small they interact with light itself. In reflected light, the silver particles scatter the light, making the cup appear green. But when light passes directly through the glass, the gold particles absorb the blue and green wavelengths, allowing only the brilliant red to shine through. For centuries, this was simply a beautiful mystery. It was only with the electron microscope in the 1990s that scientists could finally see what the Roman artisans had created. They confirmed the presence of gold particles measuring about 70 nanometers and silver particles around 50 nanometers, a size and distribution that modern science struggles to replicate consistently even today. This was not a one-off fluke. A few other examples of this dichroic glass exist, suggesting a controlled, if rare, manufacturing technique. The Lycurgus Cup forces us to reconsider the Roman workshop. It was not just a place of hammers and chisels, but a laboratory where masters of their craft experimented with materials on a molecular level. They may not have understood the physics of plasmon resonance, but they possessed a deep, practical mastery over the behavior of metals and light. They could see the results of their nano-engineering in the radiant transformation of a simple cup, a technological magic trick that would not be understood again for over a millennium. That masterful manipulation of light and color in a Roman cup is a triumph of material science, but another ancient artifact presents a puzzle not of substance but of symbols. Locked away in a museum in Heraklion, Crete, is the Phaistos disc, a small, baked clay tablet about the size of a standard dinner plate, discovered in the ruins of the Minoan Palace of Phaistos in 1908. It is arguably one of the most enigmatic objects ever unearthed. On both of its faces, a continuous spiral of strange, intricate symbols is pressed into the clay. There are 45 distinct signs in total, depicting everything from human heads and walking men to birds, fish, and abstract shapes like shields and combs. But the true revolution of the Phaistos disc is not in its imagery, it is in its manufacture. Each one of these symbols was not carved by hand. They were stamped onto the wet clay using individual, pre-formed seals, a method of printing that would not become widespread for another 3,000 years until Johannes Gutenberg's printing press revolutionized Europe. This was movable type created in the second millennium before the Common Era. The disc is a single, frozen moment of a technology that seems to have appeared from nowhere and vanished just as quickly. No other artifacts like it have ever been found on Crete or anywhere else in the Minoan world. So what was its purpose and what does its message say? The theories are as varied as the symbols themselves. Some believe it was a form of royal decree or an administrative document, perhaps a list of tributes or assets from a distant part of the Minoan Empire. Others argue the repetitive, spiral structure suggests a religious text, a hymn or a prayer meant to be recited. There is a compelling theory that it is a geometric puzzle or an early board game, its path a course for tokens to follow. And then there are the more exotic ideas that it is a message from a lost civilization or even an ancient star chart. The frustrating truth is that with only one known example and no Rosetta Stone to provide a key, the script remains utterly undeciphered. Every attempted translation is built on a foundation of guesswork. This singularity is what makes the disc so profoundly important. It is an anomaly, a technological island in the stream of history. Someone in the brilliant and still mysterious Minoan civilization conceived of a system to reproduce language rapidly and consistently. They created a set of reusable type, a literal press kit to convey complex information. This was a conceptual leap of staggering proportions, yet it led to nothing. The idea died in that single palace, perhaps with its sole inventor. The Phaistos disc is therefore more than a linguistic puzzle. It is a haunting reminder that progress is not a straight line. It is a story of flashes of genius that sometimes flare and then fade, leaving behind only a cryptic, circular message from the past, asking us not just what it says, but why we never heard its echo. The mystery of the Phaistos disc is a story of an idea that failed to spread, but another Greek invention presents the opposite puzzle. It was a working machine, a brilliant physical prototype, yet it led to no industrial revolution. In the 1st century of the Common Era, the engineer Heron of Alexandria described a remarkable device called the eolipile. At its heart was a sealed sphere, suspended so it could rotate freely between two pipes. These pipes channeled steam from a boiling kettle of water mounted below. The sphere had two bent nozzles or jets protruding from opposite sides. As the steam rushed out through these L-shaped tubes, the force of the escaping jets caused the entire sphere to whirl, spinning faster and faster in a demonstration of pure power. This was not just a philosophical toy. It was the world's first documented steam engine, a practical application of reaction principles that would not be formally defined by Isaac Newton for another 1600 years. Heron's spinning sphere was a genuine transformation of heat into rotational motion, the foundational concept behind every turbine and rocket engine that would follow. So why did the ancient world not harness this power? Why did factories not rise powered by steam centuries before the Common Era? The answer lies not in a lack of capability, but in a lack of necessity. The Greco-Roman economy was built on the backs of abundant, cheap labor, primarily enslaved people. There was no economic incentive to invest in complex, expensive machinery to do work that was already being done at minimal cost. Heron himself categorized the eolipile as a wonder, a marvel to amaze temple visitors, not as a tool to revolutionize production. It was a demonstration of pneumatic principles, a piece of theater for the educated elite. The potential was there, shimmering in the steam, but the social and economic conditions to exploit it were utterly absent. This reveals a profound truth about technological progress. An invention is not just a device, it is a solution to a problem a society is willing to pay to solve. The ancient Greeks possessed the scientific genius to conceive of steam power, but their world had no pressing need for it. The eolipile stands as a ghost of a path not taken, a clear sign that the capacity for innovation can far outpace the desire for its application. It is a haunting testament to what could have been, had the right conditions aligned to fan that single, spinning spark into an industrial flame. While Heron's steam engine remained a brilliant but unapplied idea, another ancient technology forged in fire became the stuff of absolute legend. The swords of Damascus were not merely weapons, they were masterpieces of metallurgy, so perfect they were said to be able to slice a falling silk scarf in midair and cleave through a rifle barrel without losing their edge. Forged primarily between the 3rd and 17th centuries in the Middle East, these blades bore a mesmerizing, watery pattern on their surface, a rippling signature of a manufacturing secret that would be completely lost to time. The raw material was a special kind of high-carbon steel ingot known as wood steel, imported from India and Sri Lanka. It was the unique composition of this steel, rich in trace impurities, that held the key. The smiths of Damascus did not simply hammer this steel into shape. They subjected it to an intricate, tightly controlled cycle of heating, hammering, and slow cooling. This process, known as pattern welding, folded the metal countless times, but it did something far more extraordinary at a microscopic level. The trace elements in the wood steel, like vanadium and molybdenum, acted as catalysts. As the steel was worked, the carbon within it formed into ultra-hard structures called cementite, essentially microscopic rods of iron carbide. Modern scientists, using electron microscopes to examine ancient blades, made a breathtaking discovery. Embedded within this cementite matrix were carbon nanotubes, structures so advanced we consider them a product of modern nanotechnology. These nanotubes and nanowires acted as a natural reinforcement, creating a composite material on a nanoscale. This is what gave Damascus Steel its legendary properties. The hard cementite nanowires provided incredible sharpness and edge retention, while the softer, more flexible steel matrix surrounding them prevented the blade from becoming brittle and shattering. It was the perfect balance, a self-assembling nanolaminate created over 1,000 years before we had the words to describe it. So why did the art vanish? The most accepted theory points to the depletion of the specific ore sources in India. the unique chemical cocktail needed to catalyze the formation of these nanostructures was no longer available. As the old stockpiles of wood steel ran out, the knowledge of how to work it became useless, and the formula faded from memory. For centuries, modern blacksmiths and metallurgists tried and failed to recreate a true Damascus blade. They could mimic the distinctive pattern through modern pattern welding, but they could not replicate the otherworldly sharpness and resilience. It is only now, with our most advanced analytical tools, that we are beginning to reverse engineer the process, not just as a historical curiosity, but to inspire new generations of super-strong, lightweight materials. The legend of Damascus Steel endures not just in tales of crusaders' swords being cut in two, but as a permanent benchmark. It proves that ancient craftsmen, through meticulous observation and skill, could engineer matter at a level we are only now learning to see. Even the sharpest Damascus blade could not see the microscopic structures that gave it strength, but another ancient artifact suggests that some eyes were aided in their focus. In the ruins of the Assyrian palace at Nimrud, a 3,000-year-old piece of rock crystal was unearthed. It is oval in shape, slightly convex, and ground to a surprising degree of optical clarity. This is the Nimrud lens. To hold it is to hold a question. Was this small disk of crystal an accidental product of nature and polishing? Or was it one of the earliest known magnifying glasses, deliberately crafted centuries before such devices were thought to exist? The lens itself is compelling evidence. When tested, it possesses a focal length of about 11 centimeters and can magnify objects up to 3 times. This is not a power that would allow someone to see bacteria, but it is more than enough to refine the most intricate work of a jeweler or an engraver. Imagine an Assyrian artisan using this crystal to inspect the fine details on a seal or a piece of inlaid jewelry, bringing minute flaws into stark relief. Or consider its potential as a burning glass, focusing the harsh Mesopotamian sun into a pinpoint of intense heat to start a fire or soften a tiny bit of wax or solder. The most tantalizing theory, however, connects it to the heavens. The Assyrians were avid astronomers, meticulously recording the movements of planets and stars. Could this lens have been used by a learned priest or scholar to get a slightly clearer view of the night sky, to better track the wanderings of a planet or the craters of the moon? The debate among archaeologists is a classic conflict between skepticism and possibility. Skeptics argue the lens may have been merely an inlay for a piece of ornate furniture, a decorative boss that happened to be ground to a shape that by pure chance magnifies. They point out that no other lenses from this period have been found in the region, making it a solitary anomaly. Yet its very existence, especially within a royal palace, a hub of craft and scholarship, suggests its properties may not have been unknown. Someone may have noticed that looking through this particular piece of crystal made small things larger. Whether by design or by discovery, the Nimrud lens stands as a quiet, crystalline hint. It suggests that the fundamental principles of optics, the bending of light to aid human vision, were not a sudden invention of the Renaissance, but a quiet, practical understanding that flickered into life, was used, and then was somehow set aside, waiting to be rediscovered 1,000 years later. The Nimrud lens offered a clearer view of the small and the near, but in 2nd century China, a court astronomer named Zhang Heng designed a device that could perceive disturbances on a continental scale. He created the world's first seismoscope, a bronze urn adorned with 8 dragons, each holding a bronze ball above the open mouth of a corresponding bronze toad below. In the year 132 of the Common Era, this ornate instrument reportedly detected an earthquake happening hundreds of miles away, a feat that seemed like pure magic to the Han Dynasty court. The directional precision was its true genius. When the earth trembled far to the west, a single dragon on the western side of the urn would release its ball, which would clatter into the toad's mouth, clearly announcing the direction of the quake's epicenter. The internal mechanism was a masterpiece of intuitive physics. While the exact design is lost, the most accepted theory suggests a delicate inverted pendulum was suspended in the center of the urn. When seismic waves, the invisible energy rippling out from an earthquake, reached the device, they would cause the pendulum to swing. This motion would trip a clever lever system, releasing just one of the balls from the dragon facing the direction of the oncoming waves. This was not merely detecting a shake, it was analyzing the very direction of the shockwave itself. The device was so sensitive that it could register tremors too distant for anyone at the capital to feel. Historical records tell of a day when the Western Dragon dropped its ball, yet the ground in the capital was perfectly still. Skeptics dismissed it as a failure until days later, a messenger arrived from a Western commandery, reporting a devastating earthquake that had struck at the exact moment the dragon had signaled. The Seismoscope had perceived what human senses could not. The tragedy is that Zhang Heng's full knowledge died with him. We can only reconstruct his principles from fragments of text. Modern engineers have built replicas based on the pendulum theory, and they work, successfully indicating the direction of simulated quakes. Yet the precise elegance of his original internal geometry, the exact arrangement of levers and triggers that allowed for such consistent accuracy, remains one of history's quiet mysteries. Zhang Heng's seismoscope stands as a monument to a different kind of vision, an attempt to give the Earth a voice and to hear its deep, rumbling warnings from across vast and silent distances. While Zhang Heng listened for the Earth's deep tremors, Viking sailors faced a different kind of blindness on the open ocean. Under a featureless, overcast sky, with no sun to guide them and no landmarks in sight, they could sail in circles for days, doomed by the clouds. Yet Norse sagas speak of a magical stone, a solarstein, that could reveal the sun's position even when it was completely hidden. For centuries, this was dismissed as pure myth, but science has now uncovered a stunning truth. The legendary sunstone was likely a crystal of Iceland spar, a form of calcite that possesses a remarkable property: it polarizes light. The sky itself is a vast source of polarized light, a phenomenon where light waves vibrate in a specific direction. This polarization forms a subtle pattern across the entire dome of the sky, centered on the sun. Our eyes cannot see this pattern, but a crystal of Iceland spar can. To use it, a navigator would hold the clear crystal up to the sky and rotate it. When looking through the crystal, they would see a double image due to its birefringent nature. As they rotated the stone, the two images would change in brightness. The navigator's goal was to find the angle where the two images matched perfectly in intensity. At that precise orientation, the crystal's axis would point directly toward the hidden sun, revealing its location behind the thickest cloud cover. The most astounding application, hinted at in the sagas, was its use after sunset or just before sunrise. During twilight, the polarization pattern is still present in the sky, meaning a skilled navigator could theoretically find the sun's position even when it was below the horizon. This gave the Vikings a celestial compass long before the magnetic compass was common in Europe. Experimental archaeology has proven this is not just theory. Researchers have used replicas of Iceland spar sunstones on overcast days and in twilight conditions, and they can indeed determine the sun's position with an accuracy of within a few degrees. This level of precision was more than enough to guide a longship from Norway to Greenland. This crystal explains one of the great mysteries of Viking expansion. How could they have successfully crossed the North Atlantic, a voyage fraught with fog and stormy skies, if they were solely dependent on seeing the actual sun or stars? The sunstone was their technological edge, a secret weapon against the elements. It was a natural GPS powered not by satellites, but by the fundamental physics of light itself, a secret the Sea Kings held in the palm of their hand. The Vikings navigated by reading hidden patterns in the sky, but in the heart of Delhi, another ancient marvel defies the elements through a secret written in its very metal. The Iron Pillar of Delhi rises over 7 meters tall, a testament to the Gupta dynasty's mastery from 1600 years ago. Forged from a single, massive piece of wrought iron, its most baffling feature is not its size but its pristine surface. Centuries of monsoons, scorching heat, and modern pollution have left it virtually untouched by the red decay that consumes modern steel. This is not a story of a sheltered artifact, but of a technological triumph standing fully exposed to the world. The pillar's secret lies in its unique chemical composition. Ancient Indian smiths used a manufacturing process that resulted in an unusually high phosphorus content and a surprisingly low amount of manganese and sulfur. This was not a lucky accident. It was the product of a sophisticated, localized technique of iron smelting. They likely used high phosphorus iron ore and a specific type of charcoal in a unique furnace, creating a slag that was meticulously removed through repeated hammering and forging. This precise recipe allowed for the spontaneous formation of a protective passive layer on the pillar's surface. This thin, invisible skin is a compound called mesawite, a mixture of iron, oxygen, and hydrogen. It is this layer, only a few hundred nanometers thick, that acts as a perfect barrier, shielding the iron beneath from the moisture and oxygen that would normally cause it to rust away. Modern metallurgists were stunned when they discovered this. Our own stainless steels rely on chromium to form a similar protective layer, a technology we consider advanced. The ancient Indian metalworkers achieved the same result using a completely different and remarkably elegant chemical pathway. They built a self-protecting structure without even understanding the atomic-level reactions they were orchestrating. Today, scientists are intensely studying the pillar's passive layer, not merely as a historical curiosity, but as a blueprint for the future. The goal is to design new, more environmentally friendly anti-corrosion coatings and alloys, perhaps for bridges or marine structures that can mimic this ancient, self-healing protection. The Iron Pillar stands not as a silent monument, but as a teacher. It holds a lesson in sustainable material science that we are only now learning to decode, a rust-free gift from the past to the future. Ancient Greece harnessed the power of rivers for more than just irrigation. In the 3rd century before the Common Era, they engineered a machine that fundamentally changed humanity's relationship with energy, the geared water mill. While simple water wheels had been used for lifting water, Greek engineers made a conceptual leap. They connected the wheel's axle to a system of precisely carved gear wheels, which transferred the rotational force of the flowing water to turn a separate, heavy millstone. This was not just a water wheel, it was a power transmission system, a primitive engine. For the first time, a natural, non-human, non-animal force was being consistently and reliably used to perform the hard, repetitive labor of grinding grain into flour. Imagine the economic liberation this represented. A single mill placed on a stream could do the work of dozens of men or animals tirelessly, day and night. This freed up immense human effort for other tasks and provided a more reliable and abundant food source for growing communities. The true genius was in the gearing. By using a large gear on the water wheel's axle to drive a smaller gear on the millstone's shaft, they increased the rotational speed. This meant a slow-moving river could generate the fast spin needed for efficient grinding, a brilliant application of mechanical advantage. This technology represented a crucial and often overlooked step toward industrialization. It was the first practical demonstration of replacing muscle power with machine power on any significant scale. The Romans would later adopt and scale this invention, building massive, complex mill complexes, but the foundational idea, the marriage of water power to geared machinery, was a Greek innovation. It proved that the forces of nature could be channeled not just for survival, but for production, planting the earliest seed of an industrial revolution that would, for complex historical reasons, take over 1,000 years to fully bloom. While Greek water mills harnessed the power of rivers, an entire civilization was charting the cosmos from the heart of the jungle. The ancient Maya gazed at the night sky and saw not just stars but a complex ticking clock. Without telescopes or any optical instruments, they achieved a level of astronomical precision that would not be matched in Europe for centuries. Their obsession with time was monumental, carved into the very stone of their pyramids. They did not have one calendar but an interlocking system of them, a celestial gearwork that tracked the solar year, the lunar month, and the cycles of planets with breathtaking accuracy. The most stunning of these is their calculation of the solar year. Our modern science tells us a solar year is approximately 365.2422 days long. The Maya, using nothing but naked eye observations and generations of meticulous record-keeping, calculated it to be 365.2420 days. That is a difference of just 17.28 seconds. Their prediction was off by less than a single minute per year. To achieve this, Mayan astronomers built towering observatories like the Caracol at Chichen Itza, with narrow, strategically placed windows aligned to the extreme positions of Venus on the horizon. They used cross sticks to measure angles and kept codices, books of bark paper filled with centuries of data on planetary movements. Their mathematical system, which included the concept of zero, allowed them to perform the complex calculations needed to project these cycles far into the future and deep into the past. This mathematical genius is most evident in their long count calendar, a linear measure of time that famously sparked speculation about the world's end in 2012. In reality, that date was simply the completion of a great cycle, much like our own calendar rolls over from one year to the next. Their understanding of other celestial bodies was equally profound. They tracked the 584-day cycle of Venus with such precision that their calculation of its synodic period was off by only a single day every 500 years. They knew that 5 Venus cycles equaled 8 of their solar years, a harmony they wove into their ritual and agricultural life. This was not abstract science. It was the foundation of their world. The movements of the planets dictated the timing of wars, the coronations of kings, and the planting of crops. When a Maya king looked at the sky, he saw a divine script, and his astronomers were the translators. Their celestial knowledge was so advanced that it forces a humbling question. What can the human mind, armed only with patience and keen observation, truly comprehend about the universe? The answer, carved in stone deep in the Mesoamerican jungle, is almost everything. But the Maya's celestial calculations required a secure and lasting home for their records, a need the Romans solved for their own comfort with a technology hidden beneath their feet. The hypocaust system was in essence an artificial climate, a method of central heating so effective it would not be seen again in Europe for over 1,000 years. The principle was brilliantly simple, yet its execution was a masterwork of engineering. A furnace, constantly stoked by servants or slaves, would be lit in a room adjacent to the building, often just outside the bath. This furnace did not simply warm the air, it channeled its fury. The floor of the main room was not built on solid ground. Instead, it was raised on a grid of short, sturdy brick pillars, creating a hidden, cavernous space beneath the entire floor. The intense heat and gases from the furnace were forced into this underground chamber. From there, the hot air would circulate, gently and evenly warming the floor tiles above before escaping through specially designed terracotta pipes embedded within the walls. This created a radiant heat that warmed the entire room from the ground up, a luxurious and consistent warmth that permeated the very stone. The wealthiest Roman villas and the grandest public bath complexes, like the baths of Caracalla, were all built upon this principle. Stepping into a caldarium, the hot bath, was to enter a space where the floor was always pleasantly warm, even on the coldest winter day, while the walls themselves breathed a gentle heat into the air. The system's sophistication is staggering. It required precise architectural planning to ensure even heat distribution and to prevent the buildup of deadly carbon monoxide. The pillars had to be spaced correctly, and the flue tiles in the walls had to create just the right amount of draft to pull the air through without letting the fire rage out of control. This was not a primitive fireplace, it was a fully integrated building-wide heating system. So why did such a brilliant and desirable technology vanish for centuries? The answer lies in the collapse of the system that built it. The hypocaust required a vast infrastructure, a steady supply of fuel, and a specialized class of engineers and stokers to maintain it. With the fall of the Roman Empire and the economic fragmentation that followed, the wealth, organization, and large-scale construction needed for hypocaust simply evaporated. Grand villas and public baths fell into disrepair, and the knowledge of how to build and maintain these intricate systems was gradually lost. For the common person in medieval Europe, warmth once again meant huddling close to a smoky, inefficient hearth in a single room, a step back in comfort that would last until the industrial age. The silent, warm floors of a Roman bath were a forgotten dream, a ghost of a civilization that understood how to tame fire itself for the comfort of its people. The warm floors of a Roman bath required a mastery of fire, but that same elemental force was being tamed for a far more delicate art over 1,000 years earlier along the Nile. Ancient Egyptian glassmakers were true alchemists, transforming humble sand into dazzling treasures as early as 1,500 years before the Common Era. They did not simply melt silica, they commanded it, developing techniques of stunning sophistication that would not be widely seen again until the Roman era, a full millennium later. Their primary method was core forming, a process that required incredible dexterity and patience. An artisan would start by shaping a core of clay and dung around a metal rod. This rough form was then repeatedly dipped into a pot of molten glass, building up layer upon layer like honey on a stick. While the glass was still pliable, the craftsman would roll it on a stone slab to smooth the surface, then drag combs and pointed tools through it to create intricate, swirling patterns of contrasting colors. The final object, perhaps a small perfume bottle, would be slowly cooled in an annealing oven for days. Only then would the internal clay core be scraped out, leaving behind a hollow, brilliantly decorated vessel. But their artistry did not stop there. They also perfected glass casting, pouring the molten material into carved molds to create detailed inlays for furniture, jewelry, and the iconic burial masks of pharaohs. The true genius of these artisans, however, was in their chemistry. They discovered that by adding specific minerals to the melt, they could create a vibrant, lasting palette. Cobalt produced a deep, luxurious blue. Copper could yield either a turquoise green or a striking red. Manganese gave them an amethyst purple, and lead antimonite created a sunny, opaque yellow. This was not guesswork. It was a controlled, repeatable process born from generations of experimentation. They understood that the temperature of the furnace and the chemical composition of the additives had to be in perfect harmony to achieve a consistent, stable color that would not fade or crack over time. The result of this mastery was a luxury good coveted across the ancient world. Egyptian glass beads have been found in royal tombs in Mesopotamia, and their delicate vessels were traded throughout the Mediterranean. A single small bottle of Egyptian blue glass filled with precious perfume could be worth a fortune in a foreign land, a gleaming piece of captured sky traded for gold and spices. These objects were more than mere decoration. They were the pinnacle of chemical engineering in the ancient world, a silent, radiant testament to a civilization that saw the potential for magic in a handful of sand. That same mastery of materials and gears found another astonishing expression in ancient China, not to harness power but to defy logic itself. Deep within the imperial courts of the 3rd century, a mechanical marvel known as the south-pointing chariot rolled into history. On the surface, it was an ornate ceremonial carriage, but at its heart was a system of differential gears so brilliant it functioned as a compass without a single lodestone. As the chariot moved, a wooden figure mounted on top would perpetually point its outstretched arm toward the south, no matter how many turns or twists the path took. It was a mechanical computer solving a problem of direction in real time. The secret was a purely kinematic system, a closed loop of gears driven by the chariot's wheels. Each wheel turned a vertical gear, and these gears interconnected with a complex assembly that calculated the difference in rotation between the two sides. When the chariot moved straight, both wheels turned at the same rate, and the gears moved in harmony, keeping the figure stable. But when the chariot turned, say to the right wheel would rotate less than the left. The differential gear train would automatically compensate for this difference, transferring the lost rotation into a counter movement that rotated the figure to the left at exactly the right rate to keep it pointing south. It was a perfect physical equation. The driver could take the chariot on a winding, circuitous route through the palace grounds, and the wooden man on top would serenely pivot and spin, his finger never wavering from its true bearing. In an era before the magnetic compass was widely used for navigation, this was a staggering technological achievement. It served a profound practical and symbolic purpose for the Chinese emperors. On long journeys, it could provide a reliable directional reference, but its primary role was ceremonial, a powerful symbol of the emperor's unwavering moral compass and his divine mandate to rule all under heaven. The chariot was a moving testament to order and cosmic alignment, a piece of mechanical magic that demonstrated the empire's mastery over the natural world. The true legacy of the south-pointing chariot, however, lies in its computational principle. This was not a simple machine, it was an analog computer. It took physical inputs, the rotation of the wheels, and processed them through its gear logic to produce a continuous, correct output, the direction south. It performed a specific calculation without electricity, without software, using only the immutable laws of mechanics. This conceptual leap, building a machine to solve a mathematical problem, would not be fully explored again in the West for over 1,000 years. The chariot stands as a silent, rolling proof that the seeds of computation were sown not in silicon, but in ancient bronze and wood. While the Chinese chariot calculated direction with gears, another civilization was engineering comfort from the desert's brutal heat. In the heart of ancient Persia, a civilization flourished under a relentless sun, and their answer to the scorching summers was not just a matter of comfort, but of survival and even luxury. They built the Yakchul, a domed structure whose name literally means ice pit, but it was so much more than a simple storage cellar. This was a masterpiece of passive cooling, a refrigerator that could produce and store ice in the middle of the desert. The design was a perfect marriage of architecture and physics. The structure itself was a tall, conical dome made from a special, water-resistant mortar called sarouj, a mix of sand, clay, egg whites, lime, and goat hair that acted as a powerful insulator. Beneath this dome lay a deep underground storage space, often shielded from the sun's direct rays, but the true genius was in how it manipulated the elements. The system began with qanats, which were underground aqueducts that channeled water from the mountains into the arid plains. As night fell in the desert, the temperature would plummet. This water was then directed into shallow, shaded trenches adjacent to the Yakchul. The dry desert air, combined with the radiative cooling of the night sky, would cause the water to freeze, even if the air temperature was slightly above freezing. This phenomenon, where surfaces lose heat to the clear night sky, is a principle we still use today. By morning, thin layers of ice would have formed. Workers would harvest this ice and pack it deep into the Yakchul's insulated chamber. The dome's shape and its thick, heat-resistant walls kept the sun's energy out, while the deep earth provided a naturally cool environment, allowing the ice to be preserved for months, even through the fiercest summer heat. Yet the innovation did not stop at ice production. The Persians integrated these principles into their very homes through structures known as wind catchers or badgers. These towering, chimney-like structures rose above buildings designed to catch the slightest breeze. They would funnel this moving air down into the living spaces below, often directing it over a pool of water or the ice stored from the actual. As the air passed over the cool, damp surface, it would drop in temperature through evaporation, creating a refreshing breeze that would circulate through the home. This was ancient air conditioning, a completely passive system that required no external power, only a deep understanding of thermodynamics, airflow, and local climate. The impact of this technology was profound. It allowed for the preservation of food, from fruits and vegetables to dairy, in a climate where spoilage was a constant threat. It provided a means of comfort that made life bearable and even prosperous in some of the harshest environments on Earth. To stand inside a yakchul on a blistering summer day was to experience a miracle, a pocket of winter held in suspension against the desert sun. This was not magic, it was applied science of the highest order, a quiet, elegant solution to one of humanity's oldest challenges, proving that comfort could be engineered from the very elements that seemed to deny it. The relentless desert sun demanded its own form of timekeeping, but in the bustling cities of ancient Greece, a different kind of precision was emerging, one that measured not just the hours but commanded them. The engineer Ctesibius of Alexandria looked at the steady, predictable drip of water and saw more than a simple clock. He saw an opportunity for automation. His clepsydra, or water clock, was a marvel of hydraulic engineering, but its true genius was an add-on feature we now take for granted: the world's first mechanical alarm clock. The core of the system was a large, open vessel that would be filled with water at dawn. This vessel had a small, regulated outlet at its base, allowing water to trickle out at a constant rate. As the water level dropped throughout the day, a float attached to a vertical rod would slowly descend. This rod was often notched or had pointers that moved past a scale, indicating the passing hours. But Ctesibius went much further. He integrated a separate, smaller tank that would fill from the main clock's outflow. Inside this secondary tank, another float would rise with the accumulating water. Attached to this second float was a cleverly designed lever or a string connected to a counterweight. Once the water in the alarm tank reached a predetermined level, the float would trip the mechanism. This could happen in several dramatic ways. Some models were designed to release a cascade of pebbles or lead shot onto a resonating bronze gong, creating a sudden, clattering racket. Others used a more elegant, whistling design where the tripping mechanism would open a valve, forcing a jet of air or water through a pipe to produce a sharp, shrill sound. Think of the modern whistle on a kettle, but activated automatically by the patience of dripping water. This was not a gentle reminder, it was an event, a mechanical shout engineered to startle someone awake or signal a crucial moment. The importance of this device in regulating daily life cannot be overstated. In a society without portable timepieces, the public water clocks in the agoras, the marketplaces, governed the start and end of legal proceedings, the opening of shops, and the shifts of guards. A personal clepsydra with an alarm in a scholar's study could ensure they did not lose track of time during experiments or writing. It brought a new level of personal discipline and predictability to the ancient world, automating a task that previously required a human attendant to constantly watch the shadows on a sundial. Ctesibius's invention was a profound demonstration of an advanced understanding of hydraulics and feedback systems. He transformed the simple, continuous flow of water into a discrete, binary event, an on or off signal that could be programmed by the initial water level in the alarm tank. This conceptual leap from measuring time to making time perform an action marks one of humanity's earliest steps toward true automation, a ticking mind built not of silicon but of water, air, and bronze. The precision of a Greek alarm clock measured time, but in the surgical theaters of ancient India, A different kind of precision was saving lives and restoring bodies. Written 6 centuries before the Common Era, the Sushruta Samhita is not merely a medical text, it is a detailed surgical manual of breathtaking sophistication. Its author, the physician Sushruta, described complex procedures that European medicine would not dare attempt for another 2,000 years. He began with a foundational principle that still guides surgeons today, the absolute necessity of practical, hands-on training. His students practiced their incisions on natural objects, making precise cuts on the veins of leaves, or performing delicate surgery on fruits filled with water to simulate the release of fluids from the body. This was not theoretical knowledge, it was a rigorous, disciplined craft. Among its most remarkable chapters is the description of rhinoplasty, the reconstruction of a nose. In an era where cutting off a nose was a common punishment, Sushruta provided a clear, step-by-step method for rebuilding one. A flap of skin was to be cut from the patient's own cheek, carefully left attached so it retained a blood supply. This living graft was then twisted and sutured into place over the nasal wound, with 2 polished tubes of wood inserted into the new nostrils to keep the air passage open during healing. The text meticulously details the ideal shape of the graft, the type of sutures to use, and the necessary postoperative care to prevent infection. This was not a brutal hack job, it was a refined plastic surgery procedure, restoring both form and function. The text also reveals a stunning understanding of cataract surgery. Sushruta described a technique called couching, where a sharp, needle-like instrument, a jabamukhi saloka, was used to pierce the eye and gently push the clouded lens out of the line of sight. While this method did not remove the cataract, it restored a degree of vision to those who were otherwise completely blind. The manual warns of the precise angle and depth of insertion, demonstrating a delicate understanding of ocular anatomy that would not be matched in the West for centuries. Beyond these famous operations, the Sushruta Samhita details the use of over 125 different surgical instruments, many of which are recognizable ancestors of modern tools: forceps, scalpels, probes, and speculums. It discusses the importance of sterilization by fumigation and the use of antiseptic pastes. It even describes a procedure akin to a cesarean section, advising on how to deliver a child when the mother could not survive a natural birth. The knowledge contained within these ancient pages represents a complete medical system, one that understood anatomy, prioritized hygiene, and pioneered techniques that modern medicine would spend centuries painfully relearning. It stands as a monumental achievement, a testament to a civilization that approached the human body not with superstition, but with the clear, rational eyes of a scientist and the skilled hands of a healer. The refined steel of a Roman surgeon's scalpel was a symbol of civilization itself. Excavations at sites like Pompeii and military hospitals across the empire have uncovered instrument kits that look deceptively modern. These were not crude bronze tools, but finely crafted implements of iron and steel, some even featuring complex mechanisms. A Roman doctor's toolkit was a specialized arsenal. There were precise scalpels with interchangeable steel and copper blades designed for different types of incisions. There were bone forceps with sharp, serrated edges for extracting arrowheads or shattered bone fragments. There were catheters, both rigid and flexible, to relieve blockages. Perhaps most impressively, there were specula, resembling modern vaginal and rectal specula, with clever screw mechanisms that allowed a surgeon to dilate an orifice for examination or surgery with controlled, gentle pressure. This was not guesswork, it was the product of a sophisticated understanding of human anatomy and mechanical principle. These tools enabled complex procedures that seem unthinkable for the ancient world. Roman surgeons could perform cataract couching, amputate limbs with tourniquets to control bleeding, and even trepan the skull to relieve pressure from head injuries. They used bone levers to set fractures and had a variety of probes, hooks, and needles for delicate work. This advanced medical technology was the bedrock of two key Roman institutions, the military and public health. A legion on the frontier was a self-contained city, and its accompanying medical corps was essential for maintaining fighting strength. A soldier who survived a battle thanks to a skilled surgeon with the right tools could fight again, a tremendous economic and strategic advantage. In the cities, public physicians used these instruments in valetudinaria, early hospitals that treated slaves, gladiators, and sometimes the poor. The existence of such standardized, high-quality tools speaks to a culture that valued practical science and the systematic application of knowledge for the public good. To hold a Roman speculum is to hold a piece of a system, a belief that the body could be understood, repaired, and maintained, an idea that would flicker and fade for over 1,000 years after the empire's fall. 2,000 years ago, Chinese engineers confronted a landscape rich with brine, the salty water essential for producing salt, and they faced a practical problem. Boiling vast quantities of this brine required immense amounts of fuel, a resource that could denude entire forests. Their solution was not to find more wood, but to tap a mysterious force rising from the earth itself, natural gas. By the 4th century before the Common Era, they had perfected a system of deep drilling that would not be rivaled in the West for over 2,000 years. They constructed elaborate derricks, towering bamboo frameworks that could rise over 180 feet high, resembling the oil rigs of a much later age. At the heart of these derricks, a heavy iron drill bit was attached to a long cable of bamboo, which was rhythmically raised and dropped by a team of laborers jumping on and off a lever, like a human-powered pile driver. This percussive action, repeated for months, could punch boreholes deep into the earth, sometimes reaching depths of 3,000 feet to strike pockets of natural gas. But how do you transport such a volatile substance? Their pipeline system was a marvel of material science. They used bamboo, a material we associate with light construction, in an entirely new way. The joints between bamboo segments were carefully sealed with a mixture of mud and lacquer, creating a surprisingly airtight and durable conduit that could snake for miles across the countryside, carrying the gas from the wellhead directly to the boiling pans at the salt works. This was an integrated industrial process, a true supply chain. The gas was piped to the evaporating stations and burned under large, flat pans of brine, providing a steady, controllable heat source that was far more efficient than wood. Entire industries were built upon this energy source, producing the salt that was a cornerstone of the Chinese economy and diet. This was not a small-scale experiment. Historical records describe brine fields with hundreds of wells, a sprawling energy extraction network humming with activity. The Chinese had effectively launched a quiet industrial revolution, powered by fossil fuels, while the Western world was still millennia away from such a concept. They solved the complex problems of drilling, transport, and application with elegant, sustainable materials, demonstrating a systems-thinking approach to engineering that feels startlingly modern. How many other such sophisticated networks have been lost to time, their bamboo frameworks and clever seals returning quietly to the earth? Heron of Alexandria's genius for automation extended beyond steam engines to a device that would feel familiar in any modern train station. He engineered the first known vending machine, a mechanism designed to dispense a measured portion of holy water in exchange for a single coin. The problem was simple but required an elegant solution: how to prevent temple visitors from taking more than their fair share of the sanctified water without requiring a priest to stand guard. Heron's answer was a purely mechanical transaction. The machine was a sealed vessel with a coin slot on top. When a worshipper dropped a bronze drachma into the slot, it would land on a delicate, balanced lever inside. The weight of the coin would tilt this lever, acting like a seesaw. As one end dipped under the coin's weight, the other end would rise, pulling a string that was attached to a plug sealing the outlet of the holy water. For just a moment, the plug would lift, allowing a precise amount of water to flow out into a waiting cup. Then, as the coin slid off the lever, the counterweight would reset the entire system. The plug would drop back into place and the machine was ready for the next pious customer. This was not just a clever trick, it was a self-regulating system of commerce and ritual. It automated trust, ensuring that every offering received an equal, non-negotiable reward. For the temple, it provided a steady, reliable income stream without the need for constant supervision. For the user, it transformed a spiritual offering into a tangible, immediate interaction with the divine, all mediated by the impartial logic of levers and weights. Heron's holy water dispenser reveals a society already thinking in terms of automated convenience and commercial self-service. It proves that the impulse to use machinery to replace simple, repetitive human tasks is not a modern obsession but an ancient one. The coin-operated machine was a ghost of a future economy waiting in a temple for centuries to be rediscovered. Even in the most intimate moments of life, the ancient Egyptians sought answers through observation. A medical papyrus from around 1350 before the Common Era describes a remarkably simple yet effective pregnancy test. A woman who suspected she was with child would urinate on two separate bags, one filled with barley and the other with wheat. If neither grain sprouted, she was not pregnant, but if they germinated, she was. The test held a further prediction. If the barley sprouted first, the child would be male. If the wheat sprouted first, a female. For thousands of years, this was viewed as pure superstition, a relic of primitive magic. Then, in the 1960s, modern laboratory scientists decided to put it to the test. To their astonishment, they found the method was about 70% accurate in confirming pregnancy. The ancient Egyptians had devised a functional bioassay millennia before the concept existed. The science behind this is rooted in the complex chemistry of pregnancy. The urine of a pregnant woman contains elevated levels of estrogen. This hormone, it turns out, can significantly stimulate seed germination. While the specific link to fetal sex has not held up to scientific scrutiny, the core diagnostic principle was sound. The Egyptians were not merely guessing, they were conducting a repeatable, observable experiment with a clear biological indicator. They saw a consistent cause and effect in the natural world and applied it as a practical diagnostic tool. This was not an isolated fluke. It reflects a broader, empirical approach to medicine evident in their other papyri, which detail anatomical observations, surgical procedures, and a vast pharmacopoeia of herbal remedies. They were not just relying on the gods for healing, they were actively testing, recording, and building a body of practical medical knowledge. This simple test of wheat and barley is therefore a profound artifact. It is a snapshot of the scientific mind at work in the ancient world, finding elegant solutions by paying close attention to the subtle interactions between the human body and the living world around it. Roman theaters concealed a hidden world of machinery beneath the stage floor. While the audience was captivated by the actors above, a team of stagehands and slaves would be operating a massive, circular wooden platform, a revolving stage that could silently sweep away one elaborate set and replace it with another in a matter of moments. This was not a simple turntable, it was a feat of mechanical engineering powered by a complex system of counterweights, capstans, and human strength. The stage itself was a giant wooden disc carefully balanced on a central pivot. Ropes were wound around its base, leading down to a lower level where crews could pull on them, or where heavy counterweights could be dropped to initiate the rotation. The genius was in the control, allowing for smooth, quiet, and precisely timed scene changes that maintained the illusion of the performance. Imagine a Roman comedy where the story moves from a city street to a forest grove. Instead of a long, awkward pause, the actors would simply walk in place as the entire world rotated around them, the painted columns of a house giving way to wooden trees in a seamless, magical transition. These mechanisms enabled a new kind of theatrical spectacle. Trapdoors could open to reveal ghosts rising from the underworld, and elaborate cranes could hoist actors playing gods high above the stage. The revolving stage was the centerpiece of this hidden technology, a tool for visual storytelling that would not be reinvented for large-scale entertainment until the Italian Renaissance over 1,000 years later. It reveals a culture that valued not just the art of the play, but the engineering required to bring its world to life, building mechanical wonder directly into the heart of their public entertainment. The same earth that shook Zhang Heng's seismoscope has tested the resilience of Chinese architecture for millennia. While the ancient device warned of distant tremors, another innovation was built to withstand them directly. For over 2,000 years, Chinese builders perfected a system of wooden joints known as dugong, a deceptively simple network of interlocking brackets that gave their structures the ability to dance with an earthquake rather than fight it. These were not rigid frames nailed together, but flexible skeletons assembled without a single piece of metal. The principle was one of absorption and dissipation. Imagine a series of wooden brackets shaped like inverted LS and cups, stacked layer upon layer to form a complex three-dimensional cushion between a building's heavy roof and its supporting pillars. When the ground begins to heave, the entire structure is designed to sway. The dugong joints act as a shock absorber, flexing and compressing. The interlocking pieces rub against each other, transforming the violent, destructive energy of the quake into friction and heat, gently dispersing the force throughout the entire framework. This is not a rigid resistance that leads to brittle fracture, but a graceful, calculated yielding that saves the whole by allowing the parts to move. The most stunning proof of its effectiveness stands in Beijing's Forbidden City. These palaces, some over 600 years old, have survived more than 200 significant earthquakes. In a dramatic modern test, engineers built a full-scale model of a dugong structure on a seismic shake table and simulated the massive tremors of the 2008 Sichuan earthquake. They watched as the model swayed violently, its roof shifting back and forth by several inches, yet when the shaking stopped, the structure settled back into its original position, completely intact. The wooden joints had rattled and groaned, but they had not broken. The historical development of this system is a story of incremental genius. It began in simple forms during the Zhou dynasty, over 2,500 years ago, and reached its zenith during the Tang and Song dynasties, becoming both a structural necessity and a profound aesthetic expression. The brackets grew more complex, supporting sweeping, overhanging roofs that became a signature of East Asian architecture. Each joint was carved to fit its neighbor with such precision that the weight of the massive tiled roof was transferred down through a web of wooden connections, all held together by friction and clever geometry. Modern structural engineers are now looking back to this ancient technology for inspiration in designing earthquake-resilient buildings today. The dugong system embodies principles we are only now fully appreciating with advanced computer modeling, concepts like energy dissipation and ductile design. It offers a blueprint for structures that can be both durable and sustainable, built from renewable materials without corrosive metal fasteners. In a world facing increasingly unstable ground, the quiet, flexible wisdom locked within these ancient wooden brackets holds a key to our own future stability, a lesson in resilience carved from timber. Heron of Alexandria engineered a miracle for temple worshippers, doors that opened as if by divine command. When a priest lit the altar fire, a hidden system of physics sprang to life. Beneath the altar, a fire would heat a sealed pot of water. As the water boiled, the steam created intense air pressure, forcing its way through a pipe and into a hidden container below the temple floor. This container held a counterweight suspended by ropes that ran through pulleys to the massive doors. The pressurized air would push water from this container into a separate bucket, and as the bucket grew heavier, it would pull the counterweight down. This action, transmitted through the pulley system, would slowly and majestically swing the great doors open, all without a single human hand touching them. It was a breathtaking application of hydraulics and pneumatics, a mechanical play performed for an audience of the faithful. The ceremony was transformed into a spectacle of invisible power, reinforcing the belief that the gods themselves were present, physically moving to welcome the congregation. This was automation in its purest ancient form, a programmable sequence triggered by a single event. The system anticipated the very principles that govern our own automatic doors today, where a motion sensor or a pressure plate replaces the altar fire, but the core idea of a hidden trigger initiating a mechanical process remains identical. Heron's doors were more than a marvel. They were a prophecy written in steam and bronze, a fleeting glimpse of a world where machines would seamlessly serve our every movement. While the Chinese dugong joints flexed with the earth, another civilization was engineering deep into it, creating cathedrals of water in the desert. Across the arid plains of India, ancient builders confronted a paradox: how to access a life-giving resource that lay far beneath the scorching surface. Their solution was not to fight the landscape, but to invert it, carving down into the earth to create stepwells, structures that were as much about community as they were about survival. These were not simple holes in the ground. They were magnificent subterranean palaces dedicated to water. The descent into a stepwell like Chand Bayori in Rajasthan is a journey into a different world. A breathtaking geometric symphony of 3,500 perfectly symmetrical steps cascades down 13 stories, arranged in a precise crisscross pattern that leads the eye to a dark, placid pool of water at the very bottom. This was not random excavation, it was architectural genius. The steps provided access to the fluctuating water table, ensuring that no matter how low it dropped, people could always reach it. But the design also created a profound thermal dynamic. As you descend, the blistering heat of the surface gives way to a cool, damp stillness. The massive stone walls, shielded from the sun, act as a natural heat sink, while the evaporation from the water reservoir at the base cools the air. These stepwells became the social and spiritual hubs of their communities. Women gathering water would linger on the broad landings, sharing news and finding respite from the heat. Travelers and merchants would stop to rest and refresh themselves in the shaded alcoves and pillared pavilions that adorned the upper levels. Many stepwells were intricately carved with deities and mythological scenes, transforming a utilitarian task into a devotional act, a daily pilgrimage into the earth's cool embrace. The hydrological engineering was just as sophisticated as the architecture. Some of the larger, more complex stepwells incorporated water-lifting devices. The most common was a large circular treadwheel, often powered by a pair of oxen, which would operate a chain of pots. This continuous belt of earthen pots would dip into the deep reservoir, lift the water to a higher aqueduct channel, and then empty it into a distribution tank for irrigation. This mechanization transformed the stepwell from a passive reservoir into an active irrigation engine, enabling agriculture in otherwise unforgiving terrain. For centuries, these structures managed water with a sustainable elegance we are only now relearning. They captured monsoon rains, prevented evaporation, recharged groundwater, and created microclimates of coolness and community. They represent a philosophy of building in harmony with nature, using geometry and gravity to solve one of humanity's most fundamental challenges. To stand at the edge of a stepwell is to look into a reflection of ancient genius, a reminder that the most profound solutions often lie not in conquering the elements, but in descending gracefully to meet them. That same Roman genius for precision extended from the grand stage to the palm of a traveler's hand. Deep within the archaeological record, we find exquisitely crafted portable sundials, some no larger than a modern pocket watch. These were not simple decorative trinkets, but sophisticated timekeeping instruments that allowed a Roman official on the move to know the hour with remarkable accuracy, whether he was in the chill of northern Britannia or the sun-baked markets of Egypt. The fundamental challenge was one of geometry. A sundial works by casting a shadow from a central gnomon, but the angle and length of that shadow change dramatically with the seasons and, more crucially, with your latitude, your distance from the equator. A sundial calibrated for Rome would be hopelessly inaccurate in Gaul. The Roman solution was a masterpiece of miniaturized engineering. Many of these portable dials were cylindrical or disc-shaped, made of bronze or even ivory, with a removable gnomon that could be set for the user's specific location. The true brilliance lay in the engraved grids on their surfaces. These were not just simple hour lines, they were complex webs of curves and angles, often accompanied by a list of cities and their corresponding latitudes. A traveler would consult this list, find their destination, and then adjust the gnomon to the correct height or slot for that latitude. Some advanced models even incorporated geared mechanisms to account for the equation of time, the slight discrepancy between solar time and clock time that changes throughout the year. This adjustment was not guesswork, it was applied astronomy. The knowledge required to design these devices was profound. The maker needed a precise understanding of celestial mechanics, of how the sun's apparent path across the sky shifts with the seasons and varies by location. They had to translate this three-dimensional celestial sphere onto a two-dimensional handheld surface using complex spherical trigonometry, a branch of mathematics we often assume was beyond practical Roman engineering. For the empire's administration, these devices were a tool of control and cohesion. Governors, tax collectors, and military commanders moving across vast distances could coordinate their activities, schedule meetings, and maintain a standardized sense of time. In a world without instant communication, this portable temporal authority was a powerful symbol of Roman order imposed upon a diverse and sprawling landscape. It meant that the official rhythm of Roman life, the hours for business, for legal proceedings, for the march of the legions, could be reliably maintained from one province to the next. To hold such a sundial was to hold a model of the cosmos, a personal, mechanical proof that even far from home, the laws of Rome and the laws of nature were still in perfect, predictable alignment. That same precision in Roman timepieces finds a parallel in the resonant heart of ancient Chinese workshops. Here, metallurgy was not merely a craft, it was a high science of sound and light. For over 1,000 years, Chinese bronze masters perfected alloys with a degree of control that seems almost prescient, creating objects for which the very composition of the metal was dictated by its ultimate purpose. They understood that a bell required a different voice than a sword, and a mirror a different soul than a cooking vessel. This was not guesswork, it was a systematic chemical artistry codified in texts that detailed exacting recipes. The most profound example of this mastery is found in the great bronze bells like those from the tomb of Marquis Yi of Zheng. These were not simple noisemakers. They were musical instruments of astonishing complexity, designed to produce two distinct, perfectly tuned notes when struck, one from the center and one from the rim. To achieve this dual-tone phenomenon, the bell's shape had to be flawlessly cast, a triumph of ceramic mold engineering, but the true secret was in the alloy itself. The metallurgists calculated the precise copper-tin ratio needed for each bell's required pitch and timbre. A typical recipe might call for a blend of roughly 80% copper to 20% tin, but this ratio was meticulously adjusted, bell by bell, to control the metal's hardness and acoustic properties. Too much tin and the bronze becomes brittle and shrill, too little, and the sound is dull and muted. They were, in effect, tuning the metal at the atomic level before it was ever poured, creating a bronze song that has endured for millennia. This chemical precision extended to a more personal object, the bronze mirror. A Chinese mirror was not a simple polished disc. Its back was often lavishly decorated with intricate patterns and cosmological symbols, but the magic was on the reflective front. After painstakingly polishing the surface to a brilliant sheen, artisans would apply a special mercury-based amalgam. Through a secret process of heating and rubbing, they would create a thin, glassy, and incredibly durable reflective layer that was resistant to tarnishing. Some mirrors held an even deeper secret known as light-penetrating mirrors. When bright sunlight shone directly onto the polished face, the pattern from the decorated back would mysteriously project onto a wall, as if the solid bronze had become transparent. For centuries, this was considered magical. We now know it was another feat of nano-engineering. The mirrors were cast with slight variations in thickness, invisible to the eye. During the elaborate polishing and surface treatment, these minute differences created areas of varying stress. When light hit the surface, these stressed zones reflected the light differently, projecting the hidden image. This means the Chinese artisan was not just a caster and a polisher, but a physicist who could manipulate stress gradients at a microscopic scale to encode an image within the metal itself. This sophisticated bronze industry supported the very fabric of ancient Chinese civilization. Practical alloys were developed for weapons that would not shatter in battle, for tools that retained a sharp edge, and for ceremonial vessels that defined religious and state power. Each object, from a humble farming tool to an emperor's ritual wine vessel, was a product of a deep, accumulated understanding of material science. They knew that technology was not a single answer, but a spectrum of solutions, each metal mixture a carefully chosen word in a long conversation between human need and the properties of the earth. Our journey through 30 ancient marvels reveals a world crackling with forgotten genius. These inventions were not happy accidents. They were the products of intense study, of minds that grasped the principles of leverage and optics, of chemistry and astronomy, with a clarity that would fade for 1,000 years. The precision gearwork of the Antikythera Mechanism, the molecular alchemy of Roman concrete, the nanoscale engineering of the Lycurgus Cup, all point to a level of technological sophistication that forces us to rethink the entire narrative of human advancement. Progress is not a straight, ascending line. It is a story of brilliant flashes in the dark, of knowledge won and then tragically lost. These artifacts stand as permanent monuments to that lost potential, challenging our modern arrogance and reminding us that the capacity for extraordinary innovation is a constant in the human spirit. The true legacy of these 30 wonders is the profound question they leave us with: which of these ancient marvels reshaped your view of the past the most? Let the conversation continue in the comments, and be sure to subscribe for our next journey into the echoes of history.